You're listening to Guardians of Galen, your go-to podcast for USC Trojan basketball.
Let's get started.
Welcome to Guardians of Galen, the podcast centered around all things USC basketball, even in the offseason, as, of course, USC was eliminated in the Big Ten tournament. But the offseason has been pretty up and down for USC. We've seen recently they've brought in some pretty high-profile transfers, also losing pretty much the entire team from last year, aside from Terence Williams II. But I'm joined once again by special guest Terence Holton, who, of course, was actually on the last episode. It's been a minute since Guardians of Galen has put out an episode, so we're back and we're ready for an upcoming season that should be interesting. But Terence, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Kasey. Excited to talk some USC hoops. Obviously, talking some football last night. Now we get basketball. It's a great combination.
Yeah, USC sports galore here between us. And yeah, I mean, I mentioned it in the intro. Actually, news of today, Jalen Shelley committing to LMU just down the road from USC. So like I mentioned, there's a big exodus from USC basketball these past couple of years now. Desmond Claude, we don't know where he's going. We saw Keontae Jones decommit yesterday. I think that one was kind of obvious with Chad Baker-Mazara committing. But yeah, it's been an interesting offseason. Of course, we do want to acknowledge Elijah Arenas. Hope he's recovering well from the car accident that happened. And sounds like he is.
Miracle that he is. It's crazy. Like completely, like no major bodily injuries.
And that's huge, for him and in his career, and obviously has such a bright future. So glad to see him making that progress. But I guess, Terrence, before we get into the actual roster, what is your overall assessment so far of the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about the transfers they've brought in so far. I think they're a lot more talented than last year's, and I think next year's team is going to be actually pretty good. My only problem with it is just, once again, restarting the team. That's not a recipe for success to keep every single year you get a new set of players. It's not a recipe for a successful program down the line. They need to start actually retaining some of these guys.
I agree, and I think that's sort of like the new normal in college basketball now.
Yeah.
And like a lot of college sports in general, but I think like you're not wrong. Like there are some teams, in college basketball that are able to retain guys at least for 2 years, and they build a little bit more culture. They know what it means. And, Terence Williams, it's great he's coming back. I think if I had to pick one guy to come back, I don't know if I would probably choose Claude, but I think Williams would be up there.
Yeah.
Or Yates.
It'd be Yates. It'd be Yates or Claude. But I think
Claude.
Williams is definitely up there for sure.
Yeah, I think Williams would be my third choice.
Yeah.
I think he showed some really good flashes. He was one of their leading scorers, before he got injured, and he didn't really have a chance to play into Big Ten play. And he's just a really good catch and shoot option, and I think that's something USC could use very well next year, looking at this roster. But let's get into some of our, assessments of the actual, new roster that's coming in. For those of you who don't know, I've been making depth charts pretty much ever since. Honestly, I don't even remember the first one I made, but I've been making them ever since guys been leaving and coming in. And so my starting lineup for this year, coming up, prediction: Rodney Rice at the 1, Elijah Arenas at the 2, Chad Baker-Mazara at the 3, Ezra Asar at the 4, Jacob Kofi at the 5, and then the 6th man, Amarian Dickerson, 7th man, Terence Williams II, and then from there, I have Easter, Dines, and Brownell wrapping out the lineup, 10 guys. And so, do you disagree or agree with that? What do you?
I have a little disagreement. I do think that Musselman is going to go more experience, especially Arenas. It's obviously a long time to recover from the car crash, but I think so. Point guard Rodney Rice. I have Chad Baker-Mazara at the 2. It's primarily what he played at Auburn. That's what or not really primarily, but that's what he's listed as Auburn as a guard. Terence Williams at the 3, Ezra Asar at the 4, and Jacob Kofi at the 5.
Okay, so we have some.
It's pretty similar. It's just I just think that it's very possible that obviously Arenas will be super easy for him to break into the lineup. It's a super forward heavy team, not a ton of guards. But I think Musselman goes more experience.
Yeah, and I mean, this team doesn't really have like that much guard depth at all. And
yeah.
We saw last year they had a little bit of it, but the problem was all of the guards on the team last year were so different. Like Abo was just a catch and shoot guy, couldn't really do much else. Yates was the dynamic player, could also shoot. Claude was just a rim attacker, and that worked for him. Against Big Ten defenses, he was also able to get to the free throw line. But I mean, I honestly I don't hate your lineup there because I think like we know Musselman likes a bigger lineup.
Yeah.
And given the fact that this team only has 3 guards, he also didn't really play much of, some of the young guys last year. Yates was kind of the only young guy that actually saw substantial time. We saw Isaiah Elohim and and Jalen Shelley really not getting much time, and that's why they're transferring, honestly.
Yeah,
100%.
But
let's talk about just guys one by one. So, I mean, you talk about the height, right? So, based on my starting lineup prediction, I mean, you have Rice at 6'4", you have Arenas at 6'7", Baker Mazzara 6'7", Asar is 6'8", Kofi's 6'10". Now, to compare that to last year, Yates 6'4", Abo 6'7", Claude 6'6", Thomas 6'7", and then the two centers, obviously, it was kind of split, 6'8" for AG and 6'10" for Cohen.
Yeah.
So, honestly, the height's pretty similar, but now you have a 7-footer to work with.
It's true centers is the thing, because I don't think you'd ever really qualify Josh Cohen as like a true center.
No, not at all. I mean, he didn't rebound. That was the problem.
No,
and
no.
I mean, he had the height to be a center, but he just didn't really play like one.
Yeah. If you combined AG and Cohen, it would be the perfect center because AG's physicality and Cohen's height. But alas, that's not possible.
Yeah, and I think a guy like, and we'll talk about him in a little bit, but I think a guy like a Marion Dickerson could be a really good AG replacement. Because I honestly think, like, and no disrespect to Rashawn AG, because I thought he was a great player, but I think on most decently good teams, he would not be starting. I think he's a good 6-man option. I think he's a guy who, he's kind of a spark plug. Like, he's so aggressive. He's good on defense. Like, you can put him in, in a situation to get a stop maybe, or make a layup, and he can come in and do that. I just didn't see him as, even really as a forward, a guy who could play 30-plus minutes and perform. And he actually did do that on some games, like that Purdue game in the NCAA tournament. But, yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. So I think, looking at the two lineups, they both actually have decent size. I mean, the one from last year, you don't have the option of bringing a guy like Gabe Dines. And Gabe Dines had a pretty decent season last year. I don't see him getting tons of playing time just because, we saw what happened with Cohen. You got to be able to perform. Like, if for Cohen,
I can see it just because he's really the only other main center they have is the thing. And 7'3", he averaged 3 blocks a game, something like it was. I think I want to say 3 blocks a game. Yes, I'm correct on that. 3.1 to be specific. You can't leave a guy like that on the bench is the thing. You got to at least test him out. So.
Okay, well, I definitely agree, and I think we'll see how because I honestly could see him starting on opening night, kind of like Josh Cohen, and if he performs, he'll earn. Like, I feel like the centers with Musselman have to put in the extra work. I feel like he looks at the big guys a lot more differently than the guards. But let's talk about each guy one by one, so to speak. So Rodney Rice, coming over from Maryland after a season at Virginia Tech that was pretty injury riddled. Started 32 of 36 games last year, 13.8 points per game, a very good Maryland team. They had the 7th ranked defense in the country. We know how good they were. They were a team that felt like they could have made a deep run. And so, Rice put up nearly 14 points per game. Good 3-point shooter, good mid-range shooter, can kind of do a little bit of everything. And so I think like as a Yates replacement, definitely a big upside player to bring in. He also, I mean, he's different than Claude in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
Does not attack the rim. And I think that kind of goes without saying. But I think that maybe puts a little more pressure on Arenas to attack the rim, which, we'll see how he performs. If he ends up getting the playing time that we expect him to after the incident and everything. But, I mean, Rice is also a great defender. He, didn't have the flashiest defensive numbers, but, good assist to turnover ratio last year. What are your thoughts on Rodney Rice?
I'm a big fan. I was in March Madness a big proprietor of the Crab 5. So I loved Rodney Rice. This guy is a shooter, can shoot it from deep. I love that's a lot of what this team was lacking was a true guard who can pull up and hit deep 3-pointers. Obviously Clark Slaggert, but none of the regular starters were able to actually consistently really hit the 3 ball. Wesley Yates kind of could, not the same level as Rodney Rice. There's a stretch here where he, from January 26th to February 26th, did not score under 14 points. This guy is fantastic, in my opinion. I was really excited about this addition. I was, of course, hoping that him and Claude would work well together as guards. Alas, that's not going to happen. But I mean, probably one of his best games against Illinois in that Big Ten quarterfinal, 26.7 for 9 from 3. This guy's fantastic. I'm really hyped about this ad.
Yeah, I think, honestly, to your point, I was thinking about it, not to go off track too much, but, I mean, obviously Terrence Williams was not really a guard. He's a guy who could play at the 3. I mean, you could put him at the 2 guard if you wanted to, and get a little weird.
3 or 4 for sure.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, like, you talked about the lack of shooting. Like, if you have Terrence Williams healthy all year, and I know it's a kind of big what if, like, we're talking maybe a different result here. Maybe a deeper result.
Yeah, that is very true.
I think that lack of 3-point shooting that USC had, because – it really relied on Chibuzo Abo to have a good game. And there was one game where he made 7 threes, I think. So
Yeah.
I think that was his career high. So, I mean, there were some games where he could be a spark plug and just like catch and shoot from the corner. But when Abo wasn't shooting those threes, that's when USC really fell apart. So I agree. I think bringing a guy like Rodney Rice who can really perform, from beyond the arc, that's going to be huge. And we saw, just how little USC had that last year. So definitely agree. I also was a big fan of the Crab 5. Really fun.
Also, thing that USC consistently seems to struggle with, free throws. This guy's a fantastic free throw shooter. Shot 81%. Maryland 83 at Virginia Tech the year before.
Yeah, no, great free throw shooter, and we saw them.
A guy you put on the line when you need someone to win the game at the line.
Yeah, we saw them fumble a couple games.
Lose
last
a
year.
lot of those games. I mean, I think to the UCLA game was when they could have won that game if not for free throws.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's take a look now at Elijah Arenas. I ordered this based on who I thought was going to be in the depth chart, but of course Arenas, we know, definitely kind of a big question mark right now with his status. Seems to be progressing well. Everyone's hoping for that, but I mean, just a guy who is going to bring a lot of good size at the guard position. We know Musselman likes that size, in the backcourt. He's an elite level scorer. He feels like a guy who's going to be, an early NBA draft pick when it comes around. If everything goes well, he's versatile. He can score from all 3 levels. He's just got a really good jump shot. I think Elijah Arenas is the type of guy that is looking kind of like a generational talent. I mean, based on the tools he has.
That is a bold claim. It's a bold claim to make about a high schooler.
Well, yeah, of course.
A generational talent.
But I mean, we saw it happen to Isaiah Collier. There's no guarantees. I mean, not that Isaiah Collier.
He was good. It was just.
But he was the number 1 recruit, and he fell a little bit, and he's actually doing well in the NBA.
He's doing pretty good, yeah.
But what I'm saying is Elijah Arenas is I'm saying for USC is going to be a player that really we could be talking about in a few years. It's like an elite player for USC. If everything goes right. What are your thoughts on Elijah Arenas coming into USC?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's a 3-level scorer. The one thing I heard basically about his play style, his everything from like the McDonald's All-American game where he had 12 points, his scoring upside is one of the highest in this entire recruiting class, is what I've heard from. Obviously, I haven't been to one of his games, but of what I have heard about him, he is really high potential scoring wise, and he's like, his frame allows him to be really, really like helpful on the defensive side. He's a fantastic ball handler. He has a 7-foot reach, which is crazy. He's 6'6". As a guard, that's pretty ridiculous, having just a reach that wide, I guess I could say. He's a little, I'm not gonna knock it this way. He's skinny. He needs to fill out a little bit more. This is everything I'm like heard about him, read about him. But nonetheless, the scoring upside is so high with him. Like you said, 3-level scorer, a guy who can shoot outside, who can score inside, 6'6" guard. I think if you get 13, 14 points a game from this guy, easy top 10 pick.
Yeah, 100%. And I like the freshman USC brought in. And I mean, we'll talk about Jerry Easter in a little bit, but I think last year they didn't really have like that fountain of youth. You had Wesley Yates and
yeah, but that was really it.
Yeah, I mean, other than we talked about already, like the couple of freshmen that are transferring out, but I think having a guy like that in Arenas who could really learn a lot from some of the guys around him. I mean, this is a team full of transfers, but you have some really. We'll talk about Chad Baker-Mazara in a moment, but this is a team full of transfers that have experience, and I think Arenas playing behind that. And you brought it up. I kind of wish I went and watched one of his games. I feel like it would have been really fun. Because like you said, I mean, I think he plays a style of game that can really get a building going. He can do a lot from anywhere. He can be shifty outside the arc and create looks for himself. I think, it's going to be fun just seeing him drive and adjust. I think it might, might see some growing pains, especially if they maybe hold back a little bit on giving a lot of minutes just because of the car accident and the fact he's young. So I don't know. I think, he's a guy we probably can't speak on too much compared to some others because we just haven't seen him at the college level, but Arenas is going to be fun. And I think being the son of an NBA player, he knows what he's built for this, right? I mean, people said the same thing about Bronny, but I think Arenas has a lot more
Arenas is
tools.
definitely a lot. He's not with all due respect to Bronny, not a Nepo 5-star. I'll say that.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I disagree with that, but that's a funny way to put it. Remind me who you had as your starting 3.
I at the 3 had Terrence Williams.
Okay,
So
well,
I had Chad Baker-Mazara at the 2. But
we'll get to Williams
him because we both have him anyway.
exactly. We'll get to Williams in a moment because we already seen his game at USC. But let's
Yeah.
talk about Chad Baker-Mazara.
Let's do it.
He's gonna be 26 this season.
He turns 26 in February, I want to say, which
Yeah.
is hilarious,
Which
dude.
like a lot of people hate on, but I think for USC it's huge to have a guy who's experienced. Coming over from Auburn, of course, they made a deep run this year. He had 18 points in the Final Four against Florida. Played 2 years at Auburn, 1 year at San Diego State. We know San Diego State made the national championship game.
Not with him.
Not with
He
him,
was
but
not there.
they I'm saying before that they were building the tools for the next year's run.
Chad Baker-Mazara is the reason they a year later made the
Yeah, he had 6.5
made
points
the
per
national
game there.
title.
And then spent his first year at Duquesne. Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who I think really fits in well. I think he's a good replacement and more for Chibuzo Abo because I think
Oh yeah.
yeah, I had to emphasize and more
Yeah.
because I knew you'd say that, but
Yeah.
I think they both have the skill set to space the floor well and be catch and shoot threats. He's got a great wingspan. He has averaged over a steal per game during this last year. Can handle the ball well. I mean, he's got a guy that can do a lot with and without the ball. I think that's kind of what I spoke to with spacing the ball, spacing the floor. And again, he has the deep playoff experience. He's a solid defender. He's coming off his best season. He's a guy who, of course, is reaching the final days of his college career. He's going to want to go out with a bang with USC. Again, averaged 12.3 points per game last year with Auburn, had a big game in the NCAA tournament, had some big games spread out throughout the season, played in the SEC. I think he's a guy who's going to adapt super well to USC.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of saw this out of nowhere. I think this transfer because first off, I'm completely recanting everything I have ever said about Chad Baker-Mazara being 30 years old and playing college basketball. It's completely fine. Have as many years of eligibility as you want. This is a massive ad. This is a guy who brings a ton of big game experience, a guy who is a great shooter. At Auburn, he shot 41% from 3 and 38% from 3. Is a very solid guy who can stretch the floor. He sometimes disappears in games. You take a look at the Michigan State's games in the NCAA tournament, but also against such Florida 18. He had season highs of 22 back-to-back games. I think this was when Janai Broome may have missed time. I might be mistaken, but against Kentucky and Mississippi, 2 Sweet 16 teams, he both had 22 points. This guy can step up and get buckets. I think him and Rodney Rice, that's why I kind of have him at the 2. I think that's such a fantastic guard duo of guys who can just space the floor and then you can work inside to someone else. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I don't hate him at the 2. He also had 4 steals against Florida in that game. We know Florida obviously went on to win the Natty, so you're doing that against them. He shot 57.1% from 3 in that game as well. So, yeah, I mean, we talked about free throws. He's a guy who's
I was
near
about to say, another one who this guy can win you the game at the line.
Yeah, he's near 90% pretty much his entire college career except for the Duquesne year. But he came into his own this year. He became a starter full-time for Auburn. It's a tough SEC landscape to play in, and I think it's a great addition. I think before this, I mean, at the time of recording this, he came in yesterday. But before he came in, I was feeling a lot less confident about this USC team.
I lost a lot of confidence, and now they have a solid 2 or a 3 guard. I love it.
And I think we should mention, and we alluded to it at the beginning, but pretty much in the wake of Baker-Mazara coming in, Keontae Jones decommitted from USC. Yeah. I don't think that's a huge surprise. I mean, I tweeted about it, but I think Keontae Jones is a guy who just wasn't going to get much playing time. Yeah. And that's kind of why I put Mazara at the 3, because I thought, if Keontae Jones is decommitting, he probably thinks it's going to compete with his playing time.
That's fair.
Maybe that's reading into it too much. But, yeah, I mean, I don't think losing Keontae Jones, I'm not losing sleep over that. He's a solid player. He's going to do some great things elsewhere. That's the second decommit we've seen. Now, Drew Fielder, of course, also decommitted from USC. Just thought I'd mention it. But.
Yeah, I will. The one thing about Baker-Mazara, he often struggles to control his emotions, and it was one of those things I saw a lot with Bruce Pearl, who obviously fantastic coach at Auburn. He would have to take him onto the bench and personally calm him down, get him to calm down. So I will say, first off, he should be a lot more. He's 25. He should be able to control his emotions on the court. But if that does happen, Eric Musselman would need to be able to calm him down.
And I think Musselman is a guy who could, for sure. We've seen Musselman, love him or hate him, Musselman like definitely knows how to coach individuals,
Oh
which
yeah,
I think is not something that every coach can do. I think some coaches only coach to the team and not the individual. I think Musselman did a good job of that last year. I mean, obviously like he didn't get rave reviews obviously from his players because they're all transferring out. We'll just put it that way. But maybe, there's a lot of stuff we don't know. So I have no doubts that Musselman can keep that in check. But I also think if this team starts losing a lot, like we saw last year, they'd have stretches of just like these mixed results. That's where I think things can go south. And I honestly think Musselman might have just lost the team at a certain point last year. It felt like they were pretty discombobulated at a certain point. They didn't play in rhythm with each other. And I think it kind of just took them going to the Big Ten tournament, laying everything on the line. Because I think a lot of these guys like AG, like St. Thomas, knew that like might not get eligibility again. And so I think that motivated them to play their hearts out. We saw AG do it in the Big Ten tournament. So the point I'm trying to make is I think Musselman has definitely he's going to want to kind of cultivate a locker room culture that's going to be able to kind of be adaptable to multiple years, even if guys leave. So yeah, let's move on to the 4 position, the power forward. Obviously Ezra Asar, a guy who came in from Utah, another guy who transferred previously from Eastern Carolina, had his best season last year at Utah, averaging 12.5 points per game. He had some good games last year. Had 18 points against Arizona in the Big 12. Really bolsters the forward depth that is the deeper part of the USC roster. And that was something that USC struggled with last year, considering AG was kind of forced to play the 5. I think if you had AG playing the 4, you probably would have had a lot more depth there. And then, of course, Terrence Williams was injured.
Yeah.
Can be a big presence in the paint. I watched some of his tape last night to prep for this. He's just a big freak of nature, Ezra Asar is. I think he absolutely deserves a spot at the 4 in the starting lineup, not just because of his scoring ability, but he can rebound well. He averaged 5 rebounds per game last year, gives them some offensive flexibility. Now, I think the argument for some people would be, okay, why not start Marion Dickerson over him? Because, Marion Dickerson has very similar stats and was one of the best defenders. I mean, you can make the case in the country. Of course, it's all relative to the conference, but that's kind of my argument. I mean, Ezra Asar played against Big 12 competition. Marion Dickerson played against Horizon League competition. And I mean, let's be real. USC didn't have much wing scoring last year. St. Thomas was not a score first guy. Asar can provide that. He really can. And Dickerson can as well. But I think Asar is an explosive player. He can light things up in the paint. He's big on the block. He can get offensive rebounds. I think he's going to be a big addition to the paint position.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like a high-flying, fun guy to watch. It's completely opposite of the first 3 guys we've talked about, how they're all shooters, can space it out. Asar is not going to shoot the ball from deep. Really, he's not going to shoot the ball anywhere outside the paint. But that's fine. If he's scoring, and he had some very solid games this year. You mentioned 18 against Arizona. He had 26 against BYU. That was a season high. It was a good BYU team. I think that he can be a really, really solid addition to this team. Someone who can elevate their athleticism, who can elevate the rebounding, just the entire energy of the team. Because we talked about the shooters. Now we get a guy who's polar opposite, who will batter you inside. You need a good mix of those. And a winning formula is to have a good mix of those guys. And I think they have that.
And I hate harping on the past too much, but it felt like last year they had a lot of guys who were just very, like, they had a lot of guys that were all kind of the same in terms of game.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like USC had a lot of good rim attackers last year. But then Wesley Yates was like the only guy who could consistently pop a 3. I just felt like the game was so similar. It was an easy team to figure out. And I'll give USC their credit. Last year, I think defensively they were pretty strong because they had a lot of guys who were kind of maybe out of position a little bit, like a guy like Abo and Rashawn Agee to a certain extent. But I think having guys that fit more to their roles could be huge this year. And I think Asar is a true forward. He's a guy who can score inside. He's proven himself, in a tough conference to play in. I think he's gonna be a really fun player to watch. He's a guy who can take over in games.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So let's move on to, I think, a guy who maybe is the most intriguing out of the starting lineup because he's younger than the other guys. That's Jacob Kofi.
Yeah,
coming over from Virginia.
Go Hoos.
Yeah. Your dad.
My dad went to Virginia.
Your dad went there. Yeah. Averaged 7.2 points per game. He's 6'10" as a center. 4.6 rebounds per game. 3 of those coming on the defensive glass. Seems like he's a guy whose ceiling could certainly be raised. I think he's due for a breakout 100%. Year. he's due for a year that he could be a lot more of a pressure threat inside. Shot nearly 50% from the field this year. I think it's an interesting debate. Do you start him or do you start Gabe Dines? I think you start Kofi because of his offensive ability. We saw AG starting because of that same very reason. Moves well for a big man, high level of skill. He's a guy who can kind of be versatile. He can play at the top of the post and then in the low post. He's also very mobile for a center, which I think is something we didn't see much with the USC centers last year. I think being mobile is going to be huge in kind of creating that up-tempo offense for USC. And I think he's just very skilled for a center. And I think, again, his ceiling could certainly be raised.
Yeah, no, I think this guy, he very much could be a very good center. Like you said, breakout year. I do think his 3-point percent, I think it's a little misleading, his 3-point ability. He shot 10 for 41. It's obviously not very good. That means he's not scared to shoot it, though. That means he thinks he can hit those shots. And I like that. I like that we have a center who isn't afraid to take the three, because if you can hit those, it's a game changer. Now, obviously, for a guy who's 6'10", he didn't average that many rebounds, but I think if he's starting to get more minutes as well as just overall, because he only started 16 games, if he's getting more minutes as well as paired with a guy like Asar who can box people out of the paint, then I think we'll see that raised. I'm feeling like, a little 10-6 year, something like that, where he raises his 3-point shooting up to like 30%, like can hit like two every other game or something like that. Also a very solid free throw shooter. Like we keep saying, that's a big thing in these. He had in one of his games, he had 12 points, 8 for 10 from the free throw line. That's pretty big. I think this is a good ad. I think he'll definitely start. Obviously, it's a guy who's experienced at the Power 5 level. Young guy, freshman, a lot of places to grow.
Yeah, not bad at all. I mean, he's shot 75% from the charity stripe, so
yeah.
not shabby at all. And I think he's a guy, too, like you put in a Marion Dickerson in one of these lineups. I mean, you could have some really good defensive. I mean, honestly, say what you want to say. I think it would be kind of cool to see a lineup where you have Asar, Dickerson, and Kofi in the lineup at some point, a defensive lineup. I think that's going to be scary to face against.
Yeah, I mean, say what you want about like Virginia basketball at state. They always have taught defensive basketball, though. So
yeah, and I think he's a guy who definitely came to USC to raise his ceiling, and I believe he's from Southern California as well. So.
Seattle.
Oh, he's from Seattle. My fault. I was thinking of someone else. But yeah, no, I mean, he's a guy who I think will fit in well to this team. So that's kind of what we think for the starters. Let's take a look at the bench, though.
Yeah.
Marion Dickerson, I see as a 6 man. I mean, I think it could be.
I think so. Yeah.
I think we saw with Musselman last year.
Well, I mean, what about like for you? I mean, like Terence Williams. What about him? Obviously we have different. I have Arenas off the bench, and you have Terence Williams.
I have Williams as a 7th man, just because I feel like Eric Musselman's going to prioritize defense coming off the bench first. That being said, I feel like Dickerson and Williams could very well play the same amount of minutes. I just think Dickerson is going to be relied upon more for defense, and Williams is more of a catch and shoot. And there's a chance. I mean, Williams could start. Like,
he can take it inside pretty well. I mean, I just think that one poster he had on Oregon.
Yeah, that was nice. So I don't know. I think it's definitely open for interpretation, and I mean, we'll see what happens in practices.
I do think T. Will's going to start just because, I mean, he obviously only played 7 games. He started 6 of them, though. I feel like it's the only guy returning who knows Musselman's schemes. I think he's going to start.
He also has been in the Big Ten for 5 years.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
he
knows what it's all about. But let's talk about Dickerson first.
Yeah,
I think he's going to be big off the bench in situations where USC needs that defensive stop. Like we saw at the end of some games last year, UCLA game. They needed that defensive stop, and they just couldn't get it. Sometimes Northwestern game on the road, huge blunder by the defense, and I mean, and the offense too. They didn't have Claude that game, but he was a defensive savant last year, Marion Dickerson with Robert Morris. He averaged 2.3 blocks per game last year. Came over from the JUCO level. Pretty good story. The big thing, and we've talked about this like previously. 25 points on 50% shooting versus Alabama in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Obviously, Alabama was a team that, made a deep run. They're, a top team. So for a guy just playing in the Horizon League to do that against an SEC juggernaut, he's a very confident player, just like AG was. I think he's a good replacement for AG. He's fast for his size. He's got a good leap. I mean, I think this is a guy who is a really underrated pickup for USC.
Oh yeah.
And again, he also averaged 5.9 rebounds per game last year. So he's a guy who can rebound the ball. He's versatile. He's very much a guy that I think will earn more playing time as the season goes on.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That I think he'll be either the 6 or the 7. I do think he could come in and replace really anyone from from the 2 to the 4. I think he could replace Chad Baker-Mazara at shooting guard, Terrence Williams at small forward, Ezra Asar at the 4. I think he's a lot more like Ezra Asar than any of those guys. Obviously, he doesn't shoot the 3 ball that well, but honestly, if you don't shoot the 3 but you play defense, I'm fine with that. I think that's a fine trade-off.
Sorry.
No, go for it.
I was going to say, you brought up Asar. I mean, I think we could absolutely see a position battle happening in camp between those two. I think that 4 spot is up for grabs. I mean, obviously, we'll talk about Jaden Brownell. I mean, he's also in the running for that. But I think these two guys have already proven themselves in their previous colleges, and they've also just they're freak of natures in the paint. They're both very similar players in some ways. I mean, obviously, Amarian Dickerson's the better defender statistically, but again, he was playing in the Horizon League. It's not a bad conference to be in. He actually he had some good play down the stretch. I'm trying to remember. He played one of his now teammates in the postseason, I believe.
Yep, it was the Horizon League championship. Youngstown State.
Yeah. So who did he play against?
Gabe Dines.
Gabe Dines. Yeah, we'll talk about him in a moment. But yeah, I mean that Alabama game really, and I mean I watched that game.
That's the one where you're getting recruited to a Power 5 level.
Yeah,
like he played great. Don't get me wrong throughout the Horizon League, but that's the one where that catches coach's eyes.
Yeah, 100%. And we know Musselman, brought in some good recruits this offseason. And I feel like Marion Dickerson is one of the underrated pickups. I think he's a guy who's going to earn more playing time as the season goes on, and for his size, he can do a lot. Let's talk about Terrence Williams though, because we talked about him last year. Not a bad first year with USC before the injury. I mean, he was looking like
a very solid year. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he gets injured early on. He established himself as just their best shooter. He had a really solid year from beyond the arc. Obviously got injured in that Oregon game, wore a cast for the rest of the year, didn't play. They thought they might have been able to get him back late, but they didn't. He, was a guy that I think didn't show the best of his three-point ability.
No, it was fine.
We know how good he was at Michigan doing that. So, yeah, he averaged 10.6 points per game, and I mean, played solid defense as well. Yeah. Kind of a good 3-and-D player. Even though he's a forward, maybe not your typical 3-and-D. He started in all but one game. I mean, he had a really good game against San Jose State. I know San Jose State knew not like a top competition, not Big Ten. I'll also put it that way. But I mean, what are your thoughts on him kind of fitting into this lineup? You had him starting.
Yeah, no, I mean, most of the reason I have him starting is just because he's the only returner, and I think he's a very solid. I'm not going to speak to. I'm not going to say 3-and-D just because I haven't watched enough of him to speak on his defense. Solid shooter though, can also attack the paint, as I mentioned. That Oregon poster. I think he's a very decent player who can fit in and complement the Chad Baker-Mazzaras, the Rodney Rices really well. So I like him to start because I think then you have 5 guys who have all played at the Power 5 level before, who are all contributed, I should say, heavily at the Power 5 level.
Yeah, and I talked about his 3-point shooting. Like, he only shot 36% at USC last year, but that was also only in 7 games. Yeah. And the year before that at Michigan, he shoots nearly 40%. So, I mean, I know it's not that much of a difference, but at Michigan, he was a really consistent player for them. He started his final year full time. I mean, he started a lot his junior year as well, but he had his best season at Michigan his final year. He knows what the Big Ten is made of. Again, you mentioned he's the only returner on this team. He's the only guy that can speak to the culture, and he only played in 7 games. But I think having a guy like that, I mean, Harrison Hornery was the only returner last year, and he barely played at all. Yeah. He wasn't a guy who was in the rotation really much at all. And so I think having a guy like Terrence Williams, I mean, you'd like to have one more returner at least, but a guy that knows the system, it's huge. I mean, I think it's sort of a cliche, but I think it's also something that is huge, and I think he's a good catch and shoot threat. We talked about spacing the floor with Baker-Mazara. I think Williams can do that as well. I think if you have both of them on the court, you're going to have really good wing scoring.
Yeah, 100%.
In the corners. So I'm excited to see him come back for a full year and stay healthy, hopefully. Let's talk about Jerry Easter. We're kind of rounding out here with Gabe Dines after him and Brownell as well. But Easter, of course, he's a freshman, so we don't have maybe the insight we have on some of the other guys. But he's a unique type of guard. He's kind of like Desmond Claude in a lot of ways because he can attack the rim well. He's physical. Claude was a pretty physical guy inside. I think he's going to complement Arenas well. I think it's going to be fun to see Arenas and Easter
I would like
on
to
the
see
court.
Them a lot, yeah.
I really wish LZ Harrington did not decommit from USC because I thought he was a fun freshman to have in the rotation as well. But nonetheless, Jerry Easter, I mean, there's not much guard depth on this team.
That's why I think where we both agree on this, where we think he's going to be thrust into into a lot of roles where he plays more.
And I think he's going to be a guy who can even learn from Elijah Arenas in a lot of ways. I know they're both the same age, but I think, they're both going to have to learn from each other because you just don't have much guard depth. And I want to see Rodney Rice step up and be a mentor to these guys.
Yeah.
But again, Easter is a dynamic player. He's a good scorer inside. I'm very excited to see what he brings.
Yeah, I mean he's a great scorer. As I've read, I should say, he's a very high volume scorer. The concerns with him are that translating to the next level in a more controlled system, I should say. It's a lot of like the scoring he's done is through, EYBL, AAU, same thing obviously, and the high school circuits, I guess. So it'll be a little different when he isn't the main guy, I think. That being said, I very much think he can very early contribute on this team. He was a decent passer too.
Yeah, and I mean, not to bring it up again, but Musselman just didn't really give his freshmen last year the playing time they might have deserved. And I think, like, to be fair, like, they had a lot of, like, Wesley Yates was a surprise, and we didn't really expect him to have the role he did. And then you also don't expect Terrence Williams to get injured. So I know a lot of stuff moved around. But at the same time, the main concern for USC last year was depth. And I think playing guys like Jalen Shelley and Isaiah Elohim, I don't know if they're like elite players because we just didn't see much of them.
But they had games where they very easily could have contributed more. So, like, look at the Purdue game. They were both in double digits. I feel like that should have gotten them more minutes personally.
I agree. And I think, especially for a guy, being committed to Arkansas previously, like they were committed to Musselman in his approach. And we saw it today. I mean, Jalen Shelley's going to LMU. So we'll see what that brings for him. I mean, in the West Coast Conference. But let's move on to Gabe Dines, the biggest man that USC has seen in a couple years. A few years now. 7'3", from Youngstown State. Saw an uptick in rebounds last year. Certainly a guy that, you might have start the game, win the tip off, and maybe
sub out.
maybe a little more than that. I mean, we saw Josh Cohen sub out right away when he did that, but I think Gabe Dines has a lot of potential. Again, I mean, I think he's a guy that is going to bring that size. He's not as skilled as Jacob Kofi in any regard, but he's a guy that he's coming out of the Horizon League as well, so it's not the top competition, but I don't know. I mean, I think he's a guy that you want to have a 7-footer. I mean, we saw a lot of 7-footers play against USC last year, like when they played Nebraska, playing against multiple 7-footers, and USC just didn't have a guy that could really rival that. So good to bring in the size for sure.
Look, this is a defense ad. It's not. They're not going to look to Jacob Kofi, to Gabe Dines to score 10 a game. They're going to look to him to block a lot of shots. You mentioned earlier, he's averaged in his 2 years at Youngstown State 2.3 blocks and 3.1 blocks per game. They want him to stand in the paint, be intimidating, block shots. His per 36s are actually quite good. Now, I think that's a little ridiculous in college, obviously, but he wasn't playing that many minutes at Youngstown State, and he was putting up pretty solid numbers. I think if he gets an uptick in minutes, which is very possible because he's one of two centers on this team, then I think that we could see more rebounds, more blocks, all sorts of that stuff.
I think we're going to hear more and more coming out of camp and practice because I think last year, like, people were pretty dead set that Josh Cohen was going to be that center. Like, it was only 6'10", he's not 7'3", but I mean, we saw later in the season, like, Rashawn Agee step up and again, he's not a true center, but play, big minutes at the 5. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens with Dines. Again, he's a guy I have at the bottom of my rotation, but
it also feels like it's a ad for the future, I feel like, because you can get him going, and if he can show just even a slimmer of like potential at the Power 5 level. I mean, he scored 19 against Green Bay. Now, Green Bay, one of the worst teams in the country. No, granted, Doug Gottlieb's team, yikes. But he showed potential for sure, and I think if he can show that at the Power 5 level, then I think we could really start to see him contribute 2 years down the road.
And I think, like, big picture, like, you want depth on this team.
Yeah.
Like, again, that was what the team was starving for last year. Like, there were some games where, like, they were running with 6 or maybe 7 guys in the rotation consistently, and I mean, these guys got tired. And again, you're running with probably more, like Jerry Easter and Arenas are going to get more minutes than the freshmen that did last year. So freshmen, it's hard for them to adjust sometimes that many minutes.
Right.
You want a guy like Dines coming in and relieving the stress of some of the forwards, and then that inherently is going to trickle down and relieve the stress of some of the guards. So, yeah, I think he's a good add for depth and defense. Let's talk about the last one. Last but not least, Jaden Brownell coming over from Samford. intriguing player for sure. Averaged 14 points per game. He actually had 19 points against Michigan State early in the year.
Yeah, right.
Which kind of, was surprising to see that in his game log. But, a guy that is very solid. Shot 51% from the field last year. Not a bad 3-point shooter. Again,
He's a good 3-point shooter.
Yeah,
I'd say personally.
Yeah, a good 3-point shooter. Not too bad. Made in range from about 2 per game on 4 attempts. Not too bad. But a guy that, again, will be a good depth add at the 3 and a guy that could see minutes when they need that big shot.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to justify Brownell getting up minutes over at the 3 because we talked about that's the deepest position. He's not going to get minutes over Baker, Mazzara, over Asar, I don't think, over even Dickerson, obviously, just because Dickerson brings that defense. So it's hard to justify him getting all that many minutes. Maybe it's once again, maybe down the road, maybe he gets some, but I don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, this team has 5 true forwards, and
yeah,
I think he's probably going to get the least amount of minutes.
Yeah,
I think
with all due respect,
probably by a decent amount, just because you look at this cast. We've talked about these guys already. I mean, Mazzara, Williams, Asar, Dickerson, Brownell. I mean, Williams will probably be the 4th most minutes to me, but he also has the experience on the team. So it's I feel like you're going to have him toward the top, and then Brownell maybe getting the bottom of the barrel. Again, doesn't mean Brownell's not a good player, but I think he's joining a team that added a lot of forward depth, and he's different than the other forwards. He's kind of plays like a guard in some ways.
Yeah.
And so that might help him in some ways, maybe being able to sometimes come in for
be like a tall 2 because he's 6'9".
Yeah.
He's tall. So.
Yeah, he is tall. He's a bigger guy. And we know Musselman is not afraid to run with lineups like that. But yeah, I mean, so I want to ask you, I mean, we've gone through every player, which honestly impressive on our end. Let's talk, I mean, we'll recap some of the losses I didn't get to. So St. Thomas also entering the transfer portal, but he's also out of eligibility. So he's still vying for a waiver, but Kevin Patton's leaving. Jalen Shelley, Isaiah Elohim, just looking, and then we talked about Claude and Yates and everyone else as well. But looking at this roster and our sort of mock depth chart that we've been modifying these past few weeks, kind of what do you see from this team? Do you have any sort of way too early predictions, or do you see just how will it be different than last year?
Way too early prediction for starters. I think they'll make the NCAA tournament, and not in a last team in like the 2022 or 2023 team was. Excuse me. I think this is a solid, dare I say, 6-7 seed. It's pretty good.
Wow,
I feel
kind of a hot take.
It's kind of a hot take, I think, but I think this is a good team. I think it's a lot better than last year. I'm excited. I think it'll be fun. Year 2 of Musselman.
I don't hate that prediction. I think maybe a 10-11 seed is more my reach, just because we haven't seen any chemistry.
Yeah, of course.
From this team. I mean, obviously in college basketball, it's kind of just the new normal, like we talked about earlier. But I mean, also you're banking for some things to go right. I mean, again, you're bringing in some guys who've proven themselves.
Right.
But we saw last year, they also brought in some guys who had proven themselves, and it didn't really work out. I mean, there were also guys like Wesley Yates who had never really stepped foot on a college basketball court before and thrived.
Yeah.
So I'm not doubting that we could see that from this team as well. But again, just judging what happened last year, it's hard to predict anything because I think last year there wasn't much excitement about the team, and I think this year there's reason to be excited with who they brought in because a lot more high-profile transfers than last year. I mean, Desmond Claude was, I think, the most improved player at Xavier in the Big East last year, and that was kind of the one main accolade that any of the transfers have brought in. But and it's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
But this year, I mean, you have a 5-star freshman. You have
relative breaking news, not related to the player, but the 2025-26 Big Ten opponents have been announced.
Ooh.
You want to hear the home away?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so obviously they're playing both ways at UCLA, Washington, Oregon. That makes sense. The home games: Illinois, Northwestern, Indiana, Purdue, Maryland, Rutgers, Nebraska.
That's pretty tough.
It's pretty tough.
I mean, Andrei Stojakovic going to Illinois.
Right? Yeah. And Indiana. Who's DeVries? What's the? Not Tucker. He's the kid. It's the new head coach from West Virginia. Okay. Purdue. Purdue is going to be really good next year. I'm glad we don't have to play at Purdue. I'm feeling an upset, calling an early upset. Obviously Buzz Williams at Maryland now. Then Nebraska and Rutgers.
Yeah.
Darian DeVries. Thank you.
Yeah.
Away. Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota.
That's a gauntlet. I mean, could
That's
help them.
Honestly, that is not that bad. away wise. I'm gonna be honest.
I mean,
Michigan's tough. Michigan State's tough.
Penn State's not tough.
Penn State's not tough. Wisconsin's tough. They're
Okay.
losing a lot of. Wisconsin's losing a lot of talent. Though.
They are, and we saw Wisconsin last year at a really good performance against USC. But
Right.
that's an interesting schedule. And then non-conference. I mean, we don't have those yet, but I mean, we can assume they're going to Cal. I mean, Cal came here last year. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we can assume they're going to Cal. Oh, they're playing in the Maui Invitational.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I
That'll be
remember
fun. I'm going to that. I'm really.
Oh,
excited.
really? Wow, you're gonna have to report to
No,
us
I know.
from the scene.
It's like I'm trying to remember who's in it, but I think Texas is in it. Seton Hall, I want to say it's a good field.
Yeah, and I mean, like, this could build their resume. Like, I think having a portfolio of teams like this you're playing, I mean,
Yeah,
it's gonna help you in the bubble, if that's what it comes to. But again, I mean, like, there's a lot of games this year that USC, for what it was worth, just exceeded expectations. Like, even in some of the losses, like Purdue,
that's a positive way of thinking about this season.
It is, but I think, like, I mean, you look at this team; they're picked to finish like 15th in the Big Ten going into the year, and they gave Northwestern and Martinelli a run for their money. They gave Purdue a run for their money.
Is Northwestern really the standard though?
No, but
That was a
Martinelli
team
was one of the
that
best players in the
also
conference.
barely made the Big Ten tournament.
I agreed, but
And
like,
they did it. What was their second best player's name? He got injured right before the USC game, and
well, USC went in there without Desmond Claude. So, I
Fair.
mean, for what it was worth, I mean, again, it was the depth of the team stepping up. The point I'm trying to make is USC had a poor season last year, and there's no denying that. But I think even though, like, almost everyone left, I think Musselman showed that, like, hey, I have a roster of misfit toys, and I can put it together and win some basketball games.
Yeah. Okay, wait, lastly, can I read out the rest of the
Yep.
Maui Invitation? Because it's a weaker field than like last year's was crazy stacked. But this year's, so Arizona State, Boise State, Chaminade, NC State, Seton Hall, Texas, USC, Wazoo.
Interesting.
It's pretty decent. It's not great, but it's pretty decent. I mean, Will Wade and NC State, that'll be interesting. Texas is pretty interesting. None of the rest of these teams really spark anything that interesting to me. But
yeah.
USC could win that.
Yeah.
USC could totally win that.
Yeah, and just a reminder to everybody that I mean, if it wasn't clear already, but in the Big Ten, USC will play all the former Pac-12 teams twice. So you
Yeah, of
mentioned
course.
UCLA.
Yeah, UCLA, Washington, Oregon play at and away both those.
Yeah, and so
Like
I
the same
mean,
thing.
one other thing to just talk about is the travel for this team was immense.
Horrendous. Wait, so
Yeah.
let me look at it. So they've, of course, the furthest trip, of course, it's State College. It's not too bad though. I mean, next to Ohio, Michigan, it's not horrible. It's not going to Maryland and Rutgers.
Yeah.
In one trip. So
Yeah. Again, I mean, these guys were hearing about it. They're getting back to USC at 4 a.m, and then it's like it screws up your whole schedule because it's like, do you practice on the next day? So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting schedule. I think this team can make some waves. I mean, it's all on paper. My favorite thing I like to say is we don't play basketball on paper. We play it on a court. And I think that very much applies.
I said the same thing about football last
Yeah,
night.
I mean, it's very true. Like we'll see what happens with this team, but again, I think it's fair to say that they're gonna have an up year from last year. I think Musselman just needs to build the culture. I mean, it felt like last year the team didn't really know what the UCLA rivalry meant to the university, and I mean,
you see in that second game, they just got smoked.
Even in the first game, like they gave him a run for their money, but they didn't have Tyler Bilodeau. So it was like, I mean, like you should be winning that game. But any closing thoughts on the roster? I know we covered a lot of the bases.
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, well, again, we'll have more off-season coverage. Maybe it might be just me solo sometimes, but really appreciate Terence once again for hopping on.
Happy to be here as always.
Yeah, big friend of the show, and again, we'll have more coverage as guys, we hear more about them going into the season and practices and whatnot and camp and everything. So again, thank you so much for tuning in to Guardians of Galen. Kasey Kasliner tuned alongside Terence Holton here at USC, and we'll see you in the next one with this new roster. Appreciate you guys for listening.